which is a group of lawyers, auditors, experts who've come together to work on various projects together. There's two former FCC senior staffers as part of the group. We believe community networks are critical to the growth of the internet because they serve purposes. They are competition to the incumbents. They serve unserved areas. They also have a sense of community. But I'm here to give you a little history lesson on what happened in the United States and what we think should happen next. I have some creds in this area. Just so you know, first in 2012 we helped get two small towns, Stowe Creek and Greenwich, New Jersey, wired with fiber optics based on the state law. And in 2013 we helped Fire Island get upgraded to fiber. In 2015, our research ended up being used in North Carolina to help get small communities in the Appalachians wired. In 2018, we're working with the District of Columbia Citizen Utility Board, and we're working with a group called 1 Million New Internet Users in LA, in California, who does broadband and digital divide issues. I should mention that the 1 Million New Internet Users does education in Hispanic areas to give people digital tools in schools, teach teachers how to teach the digital technology and how to get parents to understand how to use the technology. There's also, just so you know, there's a proposed settlement with Verizon New York that's current, of which Verizon has agreed in principle to fix deteriorating networks and to supply 10,000 lines in unserved areas of fiber optics currently. I'll get back to the proposed settlement. We are against this settlement. So I was speaking to a reporter and he suggested that I make an offer. If you take the blue pill, which is from the Matrix, you will find that tomorrow you won't remember my name and you won't remember that you were at the event. If you take the red pill, you'll be hearing the truth about what happened in broadband in the United States. Most people do not know the history of broadband in the United States, so I should probably give you a sort of overview. Let's see. In 1992, the Clinton-Gore campaign called something the information superhighway, and it was a plan to rewire America with a fiber optic cable that would replace the existing copper state utility wires that were put in as part of the state utility, some of which were put in the 1920s, 1930s. Most of America was finished, by the way, in the 1960s. By 2010, 100% of the United States was supposed to be completed with a fiber optic cable that was supposed to be in urban, suburban areas completely, and it was supposed to also have speeds of at least 45 megabits in both directions. In New Jersey, for example, Verizon New Jersey is supposed to have 100% of the state completed by the year 2010 with a 45 megabit service that was capable in both directions. And in California, Pacific Bell was supposed to have 5.5 million homes finished by the year 2000 and spend $16 billion. The Stowe Creek in Greenwich in New Jersey that I mentioned to you basically was part of a state law that was changed, and that's why we were able to get them wired. But there was also a federal plan called the video dial tone, where the phone companies applied with the FCC to go out and rewire the states. This is all from starting in 1992. New York did have a plan. This is part one of the broadband plans for America. This is New York. This is from a report that was given to the state of New York in 1992 by now is Verizon New York, and it said that they would have 16% of the state pretty much finished with a fiber optic wire, of which 24% of the end parts of the state would be done, and this is by the year 2000. Now you should know in all of these plans, state laws were changed to give the companies more money to be able to fund these broadband networks. At the same time, in 1996, there was the Telecommunications Act. The Telecommunications Act was designed to take the existing networks and open them up to direct competition, so that any company, internet provider, any broadband provider, any cable provider, or any phone provider could use those wires. And in New York, by 2001, there were 9,335 internet providers in the United States offering service to the majority of America. And in New York City, area codes 212 and 718, according to the Boardwatch directory, in 2001, there were 331 separate internet providers offering community services. You may know some of these names: B-Way, Panix. Many of these companies, sorry? Those companies are still around and limping, except for the fact that most of the companies were essentially put out of business. The FCC from 2000 to 2004 decided that those pesky competitors were really not necessary. We would just have the large cable companies go after the large phone companies, and that would be it. So, how did they do this? How did they get rid of? There were 7,000 small internet providers that were put out of business by the year 2006. What happened was as follows. The FCC decided that broadband, which was a Title II service, always, as part of the Telecom Act, would be joined with the internet service, which was an information service, and those two things would both be called an information service, or as I put it, a glob. This killed off line sharing, which allowed this small internet providers to use the wire to offer their own DSL. This put AT&T and MCI up for sale because they weren't allowed to resell any of the products anymore. And essentially what happened was they handed over the business to the ISPs. Today, when you hear the word ISP, you don't think of the small internet providers that started the internet. You actually think of the large companies that took over the business. So in fact, the mergers, which happened, there was a bunch of them, turned into essentially Humpty Dumpty, where AT&T, Verizon, and CenturyLink are the remaining companies that pretty much took over most of the telecommunications in the United States. However, this is part two. So the end of part one, from 1992 to 2004, the phone companies claimed that they were going to rewire America. 50% of the United States should have been finished by the year 2000. The companies collected billions of dollars per state to go out and do the wiring and didn't do it. But they were very persistent and said, no, we're going to start all over again. So I'll return to New York. 2005, Verizon goes to the state commission and says, you know, we really are going to do this new fiber optic stuff. Fiber to the home, FTTP. And by the way, we want this to be part of the state utility as Title II, Common Carrier Network, that was based on the Communications Act of 1934. This is in state law right now. Just so you know, today, broadband, the FTTP, the fiber to the home, fiber to the premises, is classified as Title II, which is a little strange when you think about the fact that net neutrality claims that Title II doesn't exist and we should get rid of it. But there's one other thing you probably don't know. In 2005, Verizon also said, you know, we're going to need more money to build this network. So why don't you give us some rate increases? There were 3 rate increases in New York City, 84%. So by the year 2009, Verizon did a 3rd rate increase where it said, quote, this is for massive deployment of fiber optics. Now, this is the POTS, regular phone lines, paying for the fiber optic networks, which are Title II. If they were not Title II, you wouldn't be allowed to charge grandma, low-income families, people in all the communities in New York that still have the regular copper wires for the networks. The amount of money that was charged to local phone customers is somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 extra for this one thing. But in 2010, something happened. In 2010, Verizon basically said, you know, we're going to be a wireless-only company. We're going to take the wires that we're building, that are part of the state utility, and the budgets for those wires to upgrade, we're going to just move it to the wireless company. Here's Fran Shamo, the former CFO of Verizon, who basically said, the fact of the matter is wire capital, and I don't have the numbers, but it's pretty substantial, is being put into the wireline side of the business for the wireless growth. The IP backbone, the data transmission, the fiber to the cell site, these are on the wireline books, i.e. they are a part of the state utility cost. So the reason why most of New York was never finally upgraded to fiber optics is because in 2010, Verizon said, we're not doing this anymore. and to move the budget, the capital budgets, to the wireless company. Which brings me to the proposed settlement. In 2013, Alex Goldman, a former Blip Brooklyn Law School student, and I wrote a report calling for an investigation of Verizon New York's financials, which are based on the fact that Verizon in New York actually publishes financials. And the finding of one of the consultants found that there was massive cross-subsidies, misallocation of expenses and revenues to the detriment of the New York operations, i.e. that they were transferring the financials of the state utility and using it for other lines of business. This is documented. So here's what's happened in New York. Verizon basically has taken all of the money for the core of the wired networks, the state utility networks, and basically used it as a cash cow, charging local phone customers to pay for all the other lines of business. Now, this gets out of hand when you find out, well, I'll come back to this for a second. So this is probably the most fun part of the conversation, zombie rules. So here's what happened. It turns out that the cost allocations, the way that all the expenses get divided up in the state utilities, is based on the FCC's cost accounting rules. Now, the reason why it's zombie rules is because the FCC's accounting rules were removed in 2007, but the state of New York and Verizon still use those same rules, and they have become distorted. It basically charges 60% of all expenses are basically charged now to the local state utility, i.e. local phone customers, that the majority, that Verizon has been losing $1 billion a year since 2010. Guess you guys didn't know that. But those are basically artificial losses because basically the copper-based local service was charged $1.4 billion in the year 2016 based on Verizon's own annual reports filed with the state, of which the copper networks only spent between $75 and $100 million on maintenance. And there was $733 million dropped into Verizon New York's budget for corporate operations, which is the executive pay, the corporate jet, and all the other expenses. So let me go back to this one thing here. Now everybody's going to say, but everybody's going to say, but everybody's going wireless. Well, the wireless networks require backhaul, as everybody pointed out. We're currently in court against the FCC's decision about the special access backhaul. In New York, the backhaul was $2 billion collected by Verizon New York, of which it didn't pay most of these expenses, making it very profitable for the company. However, Verizon shows zero number of lines. Here's what's going on with the number of lines that you've been heard about. We're losing all these lines, we're losing all these lines. Actually, these lines here are what's really going on. The lines for the special access, of which $2 billion of revenue, there's no accounting of any of the lines in New York. There's no accounting of the lines for DSL. There's no accounting for the lines to the cell sites. So there is a current settlement going on. We are against the current settlement. On May 31st, Verizon New York's 2017 financial report comes out, which we believe will show all the billions of dollars of losses. So we believe that community networks must start first at asking some basic questions. There's a critical path, which is accountability. How much money was charged to local phone customers? Accountability, where's all the cross subsidies and all the money going to the wireless? Accountability, if we want New York City upgraded, why shouldn't those financials be given to separate subsidiaries? It shouldn't. So our belief is the bottom line to it all is that at this point in time, the wires under our feet should be able to be accessed by customers, including all the backhaul. And the backhaul should be at the same cost that Verizon's own subsidiaries are using it, which would mean you're getting it mostly for free. Because at this point in time, Verizon's wireless company is basically being charged to the wireline division. Verizon Wireless is paying a fraction of the cost. Finally, net neutrality. If the networks are Title II, if customers paid for all the networks, then how does this directly contradicts what the FCC has suggested about net neutrality? The bottom line is that the FCC's entire system of all the proceedings has a systematic flaw, of which they have not looked at anything I've mentioned here. They look at no state, intra-state expenses, revenues, commitments, ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Would you like your flash drive?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Questions?